Imagine this. You're sitting in a softly lit room. A couch beneath you swallows your weight like quicksand. The air is quiet except for the ticking of a minimalist clock. Across from you, someone nods with practiced empathy, inviting you to speak, and so you do. You begin to talk about your childhood, your parents, the way you flinch when criticized, your need for space in relationships, your exhaustion from pretending to be okay. Words come, fast and raw. Each one feels like a release. You're finally being heard. But somewhere, deep beneath the therapeutic catharsis, something peculiar begins to shift. You start referring to your trauma as my trauma. Your anxiety becomes my anxiety. Your pain begins to define you. And slowly, imperceptibly, the world begins to revolve around a single, central narrative: you. Not the world as it is, not the people you love, not the subtle rhythms of life beyond your inner turmoil. Just you, your needs, your wounds, yourself. And the more you speak, the more this orbit tightens. Every interaction becomes a reflection of your triggers. Every conversation is measured by how well it validates you. Every person becomes a potential threat or a necessary supporter of your journey. You are no longer in the world, you are the world. And everything else, a backdrop for your healing. It feels empowering at first, but eventually, a strange emptiness seeps in. A gnawing sense that while you've gotten better at articulating your suffering, you've grown worse at relating to the suffering of others. You begin to wonder, have I actually healed, or have I just learned how to center myself more skillfully? Modern therapy has gifted us a powerful language. Trauma, boundaries, narcissism, emotional labor, gaslighting, inner child. These once esoteric terms now form the grammar of our lives. They've empowered millions to name their pain, to reclaim air stories, to draw necessary lines in the sand. But what if, in giving us this language of self, we've lost something deeper? What if the very act of dissecting your pain, week after week, turns you into the main character of a movie that never ends? What if growth has quietly been replaced by self-fascination? And what if our obsession with healing is keeping us from what we truly crave: connection, humility, and freedom from ourselves? This is the paradox we rarely dare to examine, that the road to self-awareness can double back into self-absorption. That while therapy may untangle the knots inside you, it can also tighten the leash that tethers you to your own ego. Think about it. A friend says something inconsiderate. Do you hear their pain, or do you diagnose them as emotionally immature? A partner forgets your need for space. Do you communicate with patience, or do you label them as toxic? A stranger challenges your belief. Do you reflect, or do you retreat into boundaries? The therapeutic lens, for all its insight, subtly trains us to see others through the filter of how they affect us. We become curators of our comfort, architects of emotional ecosystems designed not for truth or love, but for psychological safety. And in this pursuit, we risk becoming allergic to discomfort, allergic to complexity, allergic to anything that reminds us the world does not exist to protect our feelings. And so we sit there, well-versed in self-awareness, fluent in trauma talk, skilled at identifying what's wrong with the world around us, yet somehow lonelier, more fragile, more fractured than ever. Could it be that in the name of healing, we've built a shrine to ourselves? Could it be that our relentless introspection has become a kind of spiritual narcissism? Could it be that therapy, the very thing meant to free us from suffering, is now making us the center of a universe we were never meant to dominate? This isn't an attack on therapy, it's an invitation to ask a question we've been too afraid to confront. What if therapy isn't just helping us heal, but also helping us disappear into ourselves? What if the true danger isn't in talking about our wounds, but in never learning how to stop? What if we've mistaken the mirror for the world? And so, the real question emerges, not whether therapy works, but what kind of self is it helping us become? The one who transcends their story, or the one who becomes trapped inside it? Let's go deeper. What if the problem didn't begin in the therapist's office, but in the very way modern society has taught you to see yourself? For thousands of years, identity was rooted in something beyond the individual, in duty, in family, in nature, in God, in tribe. You belonged to something, and your suffering, while real, was rarely the centerpiece of your existence. But in the modern world, suffering has become a performance, and the self, its stage. To understand why, we have to go back to a cultural shift so deep, so invisible, that it now defines how we even ask the question, who am I? The philosophical roots of self-centrism. Friedrich Nietzsche once declared, God is dead, and with him, the death of absolute meaning. But what filled that vacuum? The self. In the absence of external authority, modern man was left with nothing to worship but his own reflection. The philosopher Charles Taylor describes this shift as the turn inward, a transformation in which authenticity became the highest virtue, not being good, not being useful, but being true to yourself. Yet Carl Jung warned us that self-knowledge alone isn't salvation. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, he wrote, to avoid facing their own soul. True healing for Jung required confronting the shadow, not wallowing in wounds, but integrating the parts of ourselves we deny, reject, and fear. Not just the trauma, but the cruelty, the selfishness, the resentment, the Nietzsche in the basement. But instead of doing shadow work, we often do something more socially acceptable. We perform our pain. We label it, narrate it, even monetize it. Vulnerability becomes currency. Healing becomes identity. Therapy becomes a lifelong theater in which the ego plays both victim and expert. And beneath it all, we avoid the terrifying truth Jung hinted at, that self-awareness without integration is just narcissism wearing a wise mask. The psychology of the therapeutic era. Psychologist Philip Cushman coined a haunting term, the empty self. He argued that modern individuals are plagued by a chronic sense of internal emptiness, which they attempt to fill with consumer goods, media, and, yes, therapy. In Cushman's view, the rise of therapy wasn't a response to pathology, it was a cultural phenomenon, a new form of secular ritual designed not to transform the self, but to stabilize it just enough to keep functioning in a fragmented world. And yet, we mistake this stabilization for transcendence. We go to therapy and say, I want to find myself, but what if there is no fixed self to find? Jean-Paul Sartre believed that existence precedes essence. You are not born with a predefined soul. You create yourself through action. But modern therapy often reverses this. It treats your feelings as facts, your wounds as essence, your patterns as identity. Instead of encouraging transcendence, it risks entrenching you in a self that is always healing, never healed. And when healing becomes your identity, you begin to curate your entire life around the avoidance of discomfort. Instead of growth through adversity, you seek control through boundaries. Instead of intimacy, you seek safety. Instead of challenge, you seek validation. You become not a self-creator, but a self-protector. And the world becomes increasingly hostile to anything that doesn't mirror your therapeutic worldview. The cultural machinery behind the self-obsession. Look around. We live in a society that rewards self-focus. Social media has turned introspection into content. You post about your emotional triggers, your attachment style, your burnout. You consume reels about trauma responses, ADHD hacks, and narcissist red flags. You are always diagnosing yourself, always comparing your wounds, always scanning the world for signs that your healing is under attack. In the words of Aldous Huxley, we live in a brave new world, but not one dominated by tyranny, one dominated by comfort, a world in which we willingly numb ourselves with pleasure and therapeutic language, mistaking emotional processing for liberation. The result? A paradox. You become obsessed with your feelings, yet emotionally numb. You talk endlessly about relationships, yet feel deeply alone. You pursue healing, yet never feel whole. And worst of all, you can't tell if the problem is the world or the way you've been taught to see it. The irony of the therapeutic trap. Here lies the great contradiction. Therapy promises to make you more authentic, more connected, more whole, and often it does. But when the process of introspection is hijacked by ego, commodified by culture, and repeated without confrontation of the shadow, it becomes a prison, a palace of mirrors. You learn how to speak about your pain, but not how to sit with someone else's. You learn how to set boundaries, but not how to love someone messy. You learn how to protect yourself, but not how to transcend yourself. You become the curator of your past, the protector of your pain, the protagonist of a story whose ending is always delayed, because the spotlight must remain on you. So ask yourself, has your self-awareness made you more empathetic or just more sensitive? Has your healing made you more free or just more skilled at controlling discomfort? Has your introspection deepened your humanity or only sharpened your ego? The truth is uncomfortable. Therapy is a tool, a powerful one, but like any tool, its effect depends on how it's used and by whom. Used wisely, it can liberate the soul. Used unconsciously, it can shrink the soul into a psychological fortress built of self-diagnosis, self-defense, and self-reference. We must be careful not to confuse comfort with clarity, nor self-exploration with self-transcendence, because when the mirror becomes your entire world, eventually you stop seeing the world at all. And so, the trap tightens, not by force, but by seduction. You think you're becoming whole, but you're actually becoming centered in a self that never stops hungering for validation. But what happens when this center begins to collapse? When the very thing designed to liberate you begins to make you fragile? That's what we'll uncover next. The unseen consequences, the parts of the story no one dares to speak out loud. It starts subtly. You're proud of your progress. You've developed boundaries. You've learned your attachment style. You've named your traumas. You've distanced yourself from toxic people. On paper, you're doing everything right. You're healing. But then, without warning, life confronts you with something messy. A friend lashes out in pain, and you instantly categorize their behavior as emotionally immature. A colleague disagrees with you, and your body tenses. You sense toxic energy before any words are exchanged. Your partner forgets to respond to your needs, and you withdraw, not out of resentment, but in the name of protecting your peace. You no longer interpret challenges as opportunities to grow or understand. You interpret them as threats to your psychological safety. What was once healing has become a posture of hypervigilance, a silent fear wrapped in therapeutic terminology, and beneath it all is a deep, unspoken assumption. I must always be protected. I must always be centered. But the world doesn't work that way, and so your sense of fragility begins to grow. The paradox of therapeutic language. Therapeutic language was created to make the invisible visible, to give voice to pain, to explain trauma, to decode the confusing patterns of the human psyche. But now, it's become a filter through which we judge everything and everyone. We use it to pathologize others. She has boundary issues. He's clearly a narcissist. They're emotionally unavailable. This person is projecting. Instead of wondering what happened to people, we wonder what's wrong with them. Instead of listening with curiosity, we categorize and retreat. The language that was once meant to free us becomes a wall between us and reality. It becomes a tool of moral superiority. I am healing, and they are not. And so, relationships become conditional. Community becomes contingent. Everything that threatens the delicate ecosystem of yourself becomes disposable. You don't need a dictator to isolate you from others. You just need enough psychological terms to explain why you shouldn't let anyone too close. Neuroscience and the comfort trap. From a neurological perspective, your brain is always seeking homeostasis, safety, predictability. It learns to avoid pain, discomfort, chaos. But what happens when discomfort itself becomes your definition of harm? What happens when your nervous system begins to associate emotional growth with psychological threat? Studies in neuroplasticity show that the more we reinforce certain patterns, especially those involving hyper-self-focus, the stronger those neural pathways become. The more we scan for emotional danger, the more our minds create it where none exists. Therapy, when misapplied, can reinforce this tendency. It can train you to live inside your own head, constantly evaluating how people make you feel, rather than engaging with what is objectively true or ethically right. And as a result, you lose something something primal, the capacity to endure. You become emotionally brittle, unable to tolerate the messiness of human connection. You see discomfort not as a crucible for transformation, but as a signal to escape. You are no longer resilient. You are regulated, but regulated into a corner so small, no one else fits inside. The fragile ego in a strong armor. Nowhere is this more evident than in the subtle rise of therapeutic narcissism, a state where you become obsessed with healing, yet completely disconnected from the world around you. This narcissism doesn't look like vanity. It looks like chronic self-monitoring. It sounds like, I need to do what's best for me, even when that means abandoning people who once supported you. You don't yell, you don't manipulate, you don't control. But you do something more insidious. You slowly disappear into your own process. You are always unpacking, always analyzing, always working on yourself. You retreat into podcasts, therapy sessions, emotional check-ins. You become excellent at managing yourself and increasingly incapable of engaging with anyone who doesn't mirror your language or emotional fluency. The world becomes too loud, people become too much, relationships become too risky, and so you orbit within yourself believing you're evolving when you are, in fact, retreating. Cultural echo chambers of the self, and then there's the culture, the ever-reinforcing echo chamber that tells you this is right, this is growth, this is the highest form of existence. Instagram therapists, pop psych influencers, trauma coaches, they all reward you for centering your experience. You're told to cut out anyone who drains your energy, to protect your peace at all costs, to choose yourself. These messages feel empowering, but beneath them lies a subtle indoctrination. Anyone who challenges you is bad for you. Your social environment starts to reflect your inner world, curated, agreeable, and safe. You surround yourself with others who are also healing, also centering themselves, also terrified of being disrupted. You call it alignment, but it's really avoidance dressed as wisdom. You don't learn how to love unconditionally. You learn how to love in ideal circumstances. You don't learn how to sit with difference. You learn how to walk away when your worldview isn't mirrored. You don't become strong. You become selectively armored, and the cost is enormous. The loss of mystery, wonder, and the other. When you live inside a self that's always being diagnosed, defined, and refined, you lose contact with the sacred. The otherness of people becomes an inconvenience. Their unpredictability, their chaos, their refusal to fit your emotional blueprint becomes intolerable, and so you shrink the world to match the size of your own healing journey. But as Martin Buber wrote, real life is found in the I-thou relationship, not in the I-it. You can only touch the divine in the face of another, in the real mess of presence and pain. But if everyone is merely a trigger or a threat, you never truly meet anyone. You only meet your projections of them, the silent epidemic. And so we arrive at the silent epidemic of the modern self. People everywhere, articulate, intelligent, emotionally literate, feel more alone than ever, not because they lack language, not because they lack insight, but because their self has become too central, too fragile, and too isolated to fully enter the world. They walk through life with heavy vocabularies and hollow hearts. They speak fluently of trauma, but struggle with forgiveness. They name their needs with precision, but cannot tolerate discomfort. They want connection, but demand that it never disturb their healing. And this is the final consequence of therapeutic self-obsession. It teaches you to demand a world that does not and cannot exist. A world where you are never wrong, where everything painful is labeled toxic, where no relationship challenges why. Our sense of self, where growth doesn't require surrender. That world is a fantasy, and worse, it's a prison masquerading as empowerment. But here's the turning point. What if real healing isn't about building thicker walls, but stronger hearts? What if you're not meant to be protected, but transformed? What if the next step isn't more self-work, but a radical leap beyond the self? That's where we're headed. The rebellion, the sacred, terrifying act of breaking free. Imagine standing at the edge of a mirror that's grown too large. You've spent years polishing its surface, studying every line of your reflection, cataloging every scar, every micro-expression, every fleeting mood. You know this mirror intimately. You know the story it tells. You know what triggers its cracks, what soothes its glare, what lights it from within. But now, something inside you whispers, step through, not around it, not away from it, through. Because what lies beyond is not more reflection, but reality. The first act of rebellion is this: to accept that you are not the center of the universe. Not in a shaming way, not in a self-erasing way, but in a sacred way, the kind of realization that humbles the ego and expands the soul. The ego recoils. It has grown fat on self-discovery. It has enjoyed being the protagonist in your healing, but the soul, the quiet, ancient part of you, has waited patiently for this moment. The moment when you realize healing is not the destination, it is the threshold. From healing to transcendence, Carl Jung warned us that most people seek therapy not to change, but to be confirmed, to have their suffering validated without being asked to confront the deeper, darker truth that they may have become too attached to their pain. Real transformation requires sacrifice, not of your boundaries, not of your safety, but of your illusion of centrality. It asks you to question your favorite narratives. What if your trauma is real, but not your identity? What if your truth is valid but incomplete? What if your healing is sincere but stalling you? The rebellion begins when you stop asking, "What happened to me?" and begin asking, "What am I here to become?" Because healing is about integration, yes, but beyond that, it is about transcendence, not bypassing the self, but outgrowing it, the wisdom of those who let go. Across history, the great minds who walked this path left us clues, not how to protect the self, but how to eclipse it. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, did not spend his time categorizing traumas. He taught that meaning, not healing, is the ultimate human need. Those who have a why to live, he said, can bear with almost any how. His therapy didn't circle endlessly around the past, it pointed toward purpose. Nietzsche, often misread as a prophet of nihilism, spoke instead of becoming who you are, not affirming your wounds but embracing the suffering that forges greatness. One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. He didn't want you to merely survive, he wanted you to transcend. And then there's Simone Weil, philosopher, mystic, martyr, who believed that true liberation comes not from centering the self, but from emptying it in love. The love of our neighbor in all its fullness simply means being able to say, "What are you going through?" That question alone, "What are you going through?" requires us to look away from ourselves, to suffer with others, to be with, not about. This is not abandonment of the self, it is the deepening of it, from a closed loop of healing to an open channel of service. The courage to get uncomfortable again. Rebellion means doing something terrifying, welcoming discomfort, not as trauma, but as transformation. Modern therapeutic culture has trained you to equate emotional pain with danger. But some pain is not a threat, it's a signal, a threshold. You will not become free by avoiding the people who once has. Nor you. You will not find meaning by only interacting with those who affirm your worldview. You will not grow by organizing your life around your nervous system. Instead, growth may mean this: sitting with someone who disagrees with you and learning instead of defending, re-entering hard conversations not to win, but to understand, saying yes to experiences that stretch you rather than shield you, allowing love to mess with your plans, letting someone else's pain become more important than your comfort. These are the moments that don't fit the algorithm. They don't get hashtags, but they are sacred. They are what make you human again. From boundaries to bridges, we need boundaries, especially when we've been harmed, gaslit, betrayed. But boundaries are not meant to be walls, they are meant to be bridges, structures that help us re-enter life with clarity, not escape it in fear. The rebellion is not about erasing your wounds, it's about refusing to live inside them. It's about saying, yes, I was hurt, but I am more than my hurt. Yes, I am healing, but I am not here just to heal. Yes, I am self-aware, but I am not the main character of existence. You are not the protagonist. You are a thread in a vast tapestry, and the beauty is not just in your color, but in how you weave with others. Practices of rebellion. This is not abstract. There are concrete steps to begin this rebellion. Start small. Listen without preparing your response. Listen until it hurts. Volunteer without needing to feel good. Serve without validation. Tell someone else's story better than your own. Let their pain echo louder. Let go of being understood all the time. Embrace the mystery. Engage with thinkers who offend you. Learn from those who disrupt your comfort. Each of these actions takes you one step away from the mirror and closer to the world. The power of the entered self. What emerges from this rebellion is not less of you, but a deeper you. A you that is porous, empathic, fierce in love, flexible in truth. a you that doesn't collapse when challenged, a you that can dance with chaos instead of fearing it. This self doesn't need to be protected at all costs. It knows it can endure. This self doesn't need to be affirmed constantly. It's anchored. This self doesn't seek to conquer pain, but to carry meaning through it. This is the self that heals others without losing itself. This is the self the world needs. So ask yourself, are you willing to break the mirror, to step out of your story, not to abandon it, but to offer it, to stop seeking your truth, and start becoming someone who lives truth? Because beyond the healing is something far more alive, a soul not centered, but surrendered, not protected, but empowered, not obsessed with itself, but finally free of itself. And yet, the journey is not over. There is still one final step, a realization that shatters all illusions, yet binds everything we've said so far into one breathtaking truth. The truth that awaits you now is not about healing, it's about what lies on the other side of it. Let's go there, to the ultimate truth. Picture this. You've stepped beyond the mirror. The storm of self-analysis has quieted, the echo chamber has cracked open, and now you're standing in a space that feels unfamiliar, not because it is empty, but because it is vast. There are no affirmations here, no curated language, no diagnoses to cling to, no room built from boundaries, just silence, and something ancient moving beneath it. A truth, not shouted but whispered, a truth that unravels all your questions in one breathless sweep. The self was never meant to be the destination. It was only ever the doorway. The great confusion. You've been taught to find yourself, to heal yourself, to love yourself, to express yourself. And perhaps, at first, these were noble instructions. After all, the unexamined life is a trap. But somewhere along the way, the self became not the path, but the point, the shrine, the idol. You were told to build an identity, but not how to shed it. You were taught to understand your emotions, but not how to transcend their grip. You were trained to protect your inner child, but never to become an inner elder. And so you wandered endlessly through the halls of the psyche, admiring your growth like portraits on a gallery wall. Forgetting the door was never inward alone. It was also outward, and upward, and downward, and beyond. The final truth: you were never supposed to stop at you. You were supposed to move through you. You are not the answer. You are the offering. In a society drunk on self-reference, this is a radical claim. You are not here to be complete. You are here to be poured out. Everything you've experienced, every trauma, every insight, every failure, every wound, it was never meant to be hoarded in a jar of perfect healing. It was meant to be broken open, spilled into the lives of others, made useful. The ultimate expression of the self is not protection, it is offering. Nietzsche, in his Moments of Poetic Fire, wrote of becoming a bridge and not an end. Jung described individuation not as self-satisfaction, but as integration into the greater whole, into archetypes, into myth, into humanity itself. And Viktor Frankl reminded us again and again, meaning is not something you find inside, it's something you give away. You become real not by focusing on your uniqueness, but by serving something larger than it. The soul's final transformation: you've gone to therapy, you've named your traumas, you've drawn the maps of your pain. Now imagine setting those maps on fire, not in rejection, but in reverence. You no longer need to navigate your inner world endlessly. You've memorized the terrain. Now you must walk beyond its borders. True wholeness doesn't come when every wound is gone. It comes when you stop needing to center them. It comes when your attention lifts from "what did I go through" to "what can I give now because I went through it." This is the birth of the post-healed self, the self that no longer asks to be witnessed, but chooses to witness others. The self that no longer organizes life around comfort, but around contribution. The self that forgets itself, not in neglect, but in awe. You are not here to be seen, you are here to see. This is the sacred inversion. The world told you to seek validation, but real power comes when you give attention, not demand it. When you enter a room and instead of scanning for who respects you, you wonder, who here is unseen? Who here is unheard? When you look at your partner not with the question, do they meet my needs, but am I serving something holy in them? When you walk through life not as a walking diagnosis, but as a vessel, cracked, glowing, unfinished, and ready. This shift is not glamorous, it's not loud, it's not trending, but it is sacred. It is the end of self-obsession and the beginning of soulhood. The gift of becoming forgettable. It sounds strange, maybe even offensive in a world that urges you to be exceptional. But some of the most powerful, luminous people you'll ever meet are not those who talk endlessly about their healing, but those who quietly show up, who ask questions, who cry with you without making it about them, who love fiercely without needing to announce it. They have done the work, but they do not live inside their work. They carry it like an inner fire, not to warm themselves, but to light the way. These people are rare, and often they go unnoticed because they are not seeking to be interesting, they are seeking to be useful. They have discovered the final liberation, to be free of the need to be remembered, and instead become the reason someone else remembers hope. Your life is not yours alone. You've been told that your story belongs to you, and that's true. But what if it also belongs to someone else, someone who hasn't survived yet? Someone who will need your scars to believe their healing is possible? What if the thing you thought disqualified you, your anger, your grief, your chaos, is precisely what makes you able to carry someone else through the dark? What if your story doesn't end when you understand it, but when you finally give it away? The mirror shatters, and light comes through, and so the mirror is gone now. Not broken in bitterness, but dissolved in the revelation that you are not just a reflection, you are a window, a bridge, a vessel, a hand extended. Your purpose was never to be the main character. Your purpose was to carry light through the shadows and then disappear into the dance of it all. To become so full of life that you forget where yourself ends and the world begins. The final realization. So here it is. Therapy is a gift, but healing is not the destination. Self-awareness is vital, but self-forgetting is holy. You are worthy, but worthiness is not your mission. The goal was never to build a throne out of your pain. The goal was to become someone who could sit beside others in theirs. You were never meant to be the sun. You were meant to be a constellation, a light among many, shining best not in isolation, but in relation. And now the question isn't, who am I? It's, what now can I serve? What now can I become? What now can I give? Because the ultimate truth is this. You were never here just to be healed. You were here to be transformed. And that transformation, it begins the moment you stop asking, how am I doing? And begin living the deeper question, whose pain is waiting for what I've become? The mirror is gone. You are ready now. Go give yourself away.